So I don't know if any of you know State Street, but we are one of the largest custodian banks on the planet. Approximately, we hold $32 trillion in custody assets for our clients. We have approximately $3 trillion in assets under management. So, I'd say maybe close to a quarter of the planet's entire wealth moves through State Street at one point or another. So obviously, 225-year-old company, we've built trust relationships with our clients. And as you move forward and you start to look at new technologies coming in and disintermediation of many of the intermediaries in the marketplace, it's not a choice whether we really start to adopt new technologies and how we leverage these. It is a must. I've had the privilege of having some of the top computer scientists that I have known on the planet working with me on my team, and then having folks like Amir and his team coming in and helping us with challenges that are very interesting. So if you think about it, most of the people think of the financial markets as trading. So you come into an exchange and you have a trade. That's only 1/3 of the problem, if you will, or the entire cycle, if you will. 2/3 of the cycle is really back on the clearing and depository and custody end. So that's really where State Street plays a global role within the industry. We really, while we do have certain businesses that provide different types of capabilities around markets, most of our business is really on the back end of how we manage risk. We are a globally systemic financial institution, and how we provide for that asset movement to occur. If you think about it, right, one of the most critical aspects of our business is really holding that data that we own. So it's really, data is the most critical commodity that we have. However, if you think about it, the challenge that my team and I really took on is the fact that if you think about a 200-odd-year-old bank, right, we have literally 1,600-odd applications. And these applications have some type of a data silo, database associated with that application that you actually go through some type of an SQL interface, and you end up hitting the data. So every time you're trying to pull at some of that data, what you end up doing is you need to go through an application to the particular data set that you want, and you never get a full view. This is not just our problem. This is an industry problem. When we speak to the regulators really care about that as well, because if they want to look at certain transactions that occurred in the marketplace, not only do they have to trail that data trail through many of our systems, they actually have to go to 10 different banks and 10 different participants and look at the trail through multiple of their systems. So this is a very generic problem in the marketplace that has to get resolved in order to be able to move forward and provide the type of liquidity and risk mitigation strategies that the business demands today. In order to provide that, right, what we have been doing is trying to look at it in a more holistic fashion, where we say, okay, you have data ingestion platforms. So instead of allowing that data to be ingested at multiple different points, make sure that that data, at least within State Street, comes into a singular point. And from that singular point, you need to make sure that you have some type of a data store, a data lake, that allows you to manage this data in a singular place so that you can now start to take advantage of that data. If you have those capabilities and you can start to stream that data and multiple ingestion things such as real-time data coming off of events happening in the marketplace or anywhere on the planet, how that data flows into your data lake, and this thing starts to grow very rapidly, right? So now you're talking about not only tens of or petabytes of data. You're talking about hundreds of petabytes of data that you now have to start to manage and be able to process. When you look at that, our strategy really has been to say, how do we look at that asset movement? And I'll take you to the next slide where you'll see some of the challenges that we have. So if you look on the left, right, we have multiple books of records that we maintain. So there are investment books of record on the front end where we actually have clients trading against their accounts and portfolios and positions that they hold with State Street. There is the middle office services that we provide from an accounting perspective to our clients. So, basically how their accounts are managed and what reporting occurs against those accounts and how those accounts are impacted by different types of corporate events. And then there's the back office side of the business, which is really the custody business. So for each one of these, right, there's an investment book of record, if you will, which is our quote unquote single source of truth. There's a accounting book of record. There's a custody book of record. And in each one of these scenarios, there's literally tens, if not hundreds of machines or applications that these transactions have to propagate through. So when you start to look at that complexity, what we want to really achieve is a single book of record that is on the right side. And that single book of record is really what you're measuring or what you're trying to track is asset movement across a planetary scale and how that asset movement occurs and what you can do to provide views into that asset movement, whether those views may be from a accounting perspective or a custody perspective or an investment perspective. These are simply different views. So in order to combine those books of records into a singular record and being able to provide views on top of it makes our regulators' jobs much easier to be able to find information and our job easier to be able to manage the type of information that we manage for our clients. Now, when you start to look at all of this stuff, so we've heard about blockchain and things like that, and there's Bitcoin mania hitting Wall Street as of last week since CBOE went out. Blockchain technologies and Bitcoin, if you will, and how Bitcoin leverages blockchain technologies is very different than how we think of some of these technologies. Bitcoin itself is built with anonymity built into mind, right? So all transactions that are occurring, anonymity was built into those transactions, and you really don't want to know who these people are, or they don't want you to know who these people are for the most part. Now they can start to put security and other components on top of it as bolt-on components. But as you know, from an architecture perspective, it's really difficult to start to do something from a bolt-on perspective unless you've built it into the architecture itself. So in our world, know your client and anti-money laundering type of capabilities, KYC, AML, is really critical. So the way we think about it and the way people transact with the bank, right? Again, like I said, significant amount of the planet's wealth moves through State Street. We have to know exactly who is transacting with us and what is being done on the most granular level imaginable. In order to do that, what we are doing is we are really creating a known network of blockchain network that allows us to really propagate identity back to our clients and all participants on that network, and then allow them to do these transactions in the most secure fashion possible, because now you do start to bring in all the cryptographic capabilities that blockchain does allow you to have, but you know exactly who is doing what types of things. That's a critical component. If you think of those types of asset movements, and this is across all asset classes, if you think about those types of asset movements occurring on top of this blockchain, and you can start to really see exactly who is doing what types of things, it gives you a singular book of record, and you can actually allow different people based on their identity, cryptographic identity, to be able to look at different types of events. So if JP is doing a trade, And Citi should never have access to that type of information. They never will, because it is completely blocked. However, if a regulator needs to be looking at it from an observational point of view, you can provide them a special signatory capability that allows them to look at all transactions across the board in a singular fashion. So it becomes extremely interesting, and the capability is something that starts to show real merit. Now, where does AI fit into this equation? So again, we're talking about data, and we're talking about petabytes of data coming in and out. What we have really worked on actually together in my past life was surveillance systems, where you can actually start to look at how market manipulation might exist on certain types of trades, and how can you identify that via anomaly detection, right? We have today, for how sophisticated, and this is not unique to State Street, I'll suggest that almost every single major bank that I know has exactly the same challenge. Today, multiple transactions come into these banks via faxes, literally handwritten notes that say, execute X, right? And now some human has to actually take that note and make sense of it and do something with that. That is a very time-consuming process, and as you propagate through multiple systems and applications, it requires thousands of hours of manual labor every single day. We, just at State Street, have literally tens of thousands of hours spent on reconciliation between multiple systems that we have. So now when you start to look at some of the types of capabilities that machine learning ends up providing you, we break it down into a few different major chunks, if you will. There are NLP capabilities, so allows you to really look at the content of the information that's coming in and be able to decipher that information. So you can start to do things like classification of the data. You can start to extract entity information out of that data. And now you can start to put some type of relationship management around that to say what entities are doing what types of things with who, and start to apply different types of statistical models on top of that, right? Another major chunk is really around anomaly detection, which is really, you guys are probably mathematicians in here, so it's really a mathematical problem where you want to look at a large data set and see, where anomalies exist. And we have multiple of these scenarios happening within our bank. So one easy example would be that on a daily basis, we have literally tens of thousands of alerts that are generated via different types of transactions that are flowing through the bank. And when these alerts are generated, today we actually have to go through manually and look at these alerts and figure out whether it is correct or not. And as you can imagine, if human beings are doing that job, there is a significant portion of that job that we may mark it incorrectly and say, well, this shouldn't be an alert, where it really should be a problem and it should be flagged. So when we do that, that impact might not be felt immediately, but we feel that impact X number of days later when we go into settlement periods. So while certain books of record may show certain activity on them, 10 days later we might need to go back and actually change those books of records, and in certain cases, State Street is liable for making sure that our clients are made whole one way or another. So if we made a mistake, that's our mistake. We need to make sure that's the trust relationship that we have over 225 years with our clients. So anomaly detection has a very special place for us. And then obviously the last component, and some of the other folks before me spoke of, is around predictive analytics, right? How you can take historical data, and if we have access to some of the most interesting data, if you will, if you find finance interesting, you can actually start to see through historical patterns the types of activity that might have occurred in the past, and then you can start to predict what you may expect to happen in the future. And now, going through multiple machine training models, you can start to make these models better and better and better, and you can start to bring that prediction within a certain threshold. So it becomes very interesting for some of our companies. So that's kind of the overall theme of what my team and I are engaged in, and thankfully some of my old friends end up helping us when we ask them to, and we're engaged on many different projects with these guys, some of the most capable ML folks that I know of, so very grateful for that, and I'll field any questions that you may or may not have.
Yeah.